Hello and welcome to Security Auditing for Dummies. My name is Shadia.
And my name is Rachel.
Today we'll be taking an in-depth look at what is a security audit.
We will cover what a security audit is, how to manage a successful audit, establishing a security baseline, objectives of an audit, how to prepare for an audit, how to digest and implement an audit report, and tips for the past and future.
A security audit is the evaluation of a company's information system. It checks for potential threats, risks, and gives a broad overview of how to prevent and diminish risks. It assesses the system's configuration and software as well as the employee's risks. The audits are done in order to determine regulatory compliance. Security audits measure an information system's performance against a line of criteria. Involves a comprehensive study of an entire information system, seeking potential security weaknesses. A security expert tries a number of attacks to check whether or not the system could withstand the system types of attacks from a malicious hacker.
To manage a successful audit, one needs to establish a security baseline, spell out your objectives and requirements, select good auditors if there is not an internal auditing group, involve business unit managers early in the process, ensure that the audit is conducted properly, and intelligently evaluate the report and its findings. The security audit should cover services, ports, modems, security event logging, warning messages, and backups.
Establishing a security baseline. Your security policies are your foundation. Without these policies and standards, there's no guideline to determine the level of risk that will be dealt with as we continue through the audit. Some things to take into consideration when establishing a baseline are password policies. Configure your company's policies in the password policy section of the account policies. Some common suggestions are enforce password history, maximum password age enabled, minimum password age enabled. Passwords must meet complexity requirements, store passwords using reversible encryption, and minimal password length. There's also user rights. Configure your company's policies in the user rights assignment section of the local policies. Some common suggestions are 1. Have access to the computer from the network. Generally, workstations only need to have administrators listed, whereas servers usually need to be accessed by many different users from the network. Create permanent shared objects, administrators only. 3. Log on locally, only those who require local access. 4. Manage auditing and security logs, administrators only.
Before looking at audit firms, the company should spell out what they want the audit group or team to cover. When spelling out objectives, one should define the security perimeter and determine the requirements. The security perimeter is both a conceptual and physical boundary, and anything outside of the boundary your audit will ignore. You ultimately decide for yourself what your security perimeter is, but a general rule of thumb is that the security perimeter should be the smallest boundary that contains the assets that you own and or need to control for your own company's security. When determining the requirements, one should think about these questions. Will the server be connected to the enterprise network and joined to the domain? What function or functions will the server provide? Will there be applications running on it? What type of hardware will you need? Will it be located behind a firewall? What protocols will you need? Now let's look at an example. Let's say you want an auditor to review a new checkpoint firewall deployment on a Red Hat Linux platform. You will want to make sure that the auditor plans to review and document the security mechanisms configured on the checkpoint firewall and the checkpoint management station, review the checkpoint firewall configuration to evaluate possible exposures to unauthorized network connections, review the Red Hat Linux OS configuration to harden it against security exposures, review router configuration and logging procedures. From a security perspective, certify the firewall and OS for production, document disaster recovery procedures for the firewall and OS and good housekeeping procedures for checkpoint object management, perform a penetration test once the firewall and OS are in production. Overall, the scope of the example is the new firewall and existing platform. The audit requirements set cover all the possible gaps and loopholes in security, ensure the setup of the firewall was documented and done correctly, ensure that the company has procedures for disaster recovery and emergency circumstances, and is then tested to see if the security parameters and features perform to the standards of the company's security policies.
Prepare to be audited. Auditors must be aware of the information beforehand, such as any projects coming and data that needs to be assessed. All the information must come in writing to avoid any confusion or complications in the long run. Copies of policies along with the system configuration data should be provided. Set ground rules. 1. Your manager should specify restrictions such as the time of day and testing methods to limit impact on production systems. 2. Make sure the auditors conform to your policy on handling proprietary information. 3. Give auditors an indemnification statement authorizing them to probe the network. Also, prep work, copies of all relevant policies and procedures. Policies may include end-user policies, such as password expiration, virus scanning, acceptable use, privacy for internal users and client data, privilege access, and incident handling. Some of the procedures to review are data backup, disaster recovery, incident response, and system administration, as well as having external security devices such as software and IDS, and list of application software.
After the audit has been completed, one should review the report with management and anyone who is affected within the scope. The auditor's analysis should follow established criteria, apply to your specific environment. This is the nitty-gritty and will help determine the remedies you implement. Specifically, the report should outline the source of the threat from internal users or the public internet, the probability of exploitation, the impact of the exposure, bottom line, how much money or loss of reputation, etc. will it cost the organization if the exposure is exploited, recommended actions to fix problems. Actions may include changing or adding onto policies, applying patches, or a redesign of the system architecture. If the risk is greater than the cost of repair, some findings may be low-risk problems such as not displaying warning banners on servers and is easily fixed at virtually no cost. Some findings may involve balancing the costs and risks. For example, using an application with a history of repeated security problems may be a higher risk, but it may be more costly to integrate a more secure application. In addition, the most secure application may not be the best business application. Security is a balance of cost versus risk. Potential legal liability. Could your system become a repository for contraband? For example, a web server may have an exposure that would permit an outsider to post files to it, though not overwrite content. This may not seem like a big issue, but people who trade in contraband look for untraceable storage locations for their data. The risk of service interruption, such as a DOS attack. Lastly, the report should set a time frame that fixes must be done by. This ensures that the issues and potential issues found in the report are fixed. A manager should ensure that their employees completed the resolutions. The point of the audit is to find the problems and fix them. If the issues are not solved or fixed, the company has then wasted money and the issues still exist.
Some tips not mentioned in previous slides are creating backups, such as on-site storage, off-site storage, secured access to backups, and scheduling backups. Another important factor is that you cannot predict the future, but you can always try to be as cautious as possible when performing an audit.
In conclusion, security audits cover physical properties, policies, recovery plans, and more. Companies and businesses should conduct security audits routinely in order to stay up to date.
They offer a way for companies and businesses to check up on their own security and can help them stay secure over time.
Thank you for watching, and we hope you have gained knowledge on security audits and their importance.